Support comes from Perec, working to construct the spaces where the St. Louis community works, learns, and grows. More at perec.com.
In the St. Louis Public Radio Community Room, we set up 5 round tables. Neighbors who live near the St. Louis city-county line filtered in. It was a week after the release of our last episode, which dives into why the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County voted to separate 150 years ago. We invited them to listen to the episode together and share their thoughts with us and with each other about what it's like to live so close to that divide. They talked about the differences between the city and the county, disparities in schooling, frustrations with leadership, and the stories they hear from their friends and neighbors about why they don't cross the border. And more than one person brought up a specific and striking concern.
That's happened to me a couple times where I've had to call 911 and they go, "Oh, sorry, we're going to get you over to the county." And I go, "Okay." And then the county answers, I tell them everything, they go, "Oh, sorry, you're in the city. We're going to have to get you over to the city."
It's an emergency.
Then I go back to the city, and then they were like, "Oh, no, we're going to have to get you over to the county." I go, "No, I live here. I know where I am. This is the city. I pay my taxes to the city. I just need an ambulance."
And another participant said for her, it was a grave concern.
In 2010, I moved my mother in with me. She was blind, almost deaf. She also had leukemia. And I said, "Mom, you'll be safe at my house, okay?" So, 2010, she went up to listen to her book, and she had a heart attack. And I ran up there and called 911. They never came. Yeah. And I called again, and she was arresting, and I was trying to talk to them and trying to give her CPR, and she passed away. They could not find my house because it was half city, half county. So that concerns me.
I'm sorry to hear that. So then just no one ever showed up?
Eventually, about 40 minutes later, and now I have a husband who has heart problems. And I'm a little bit in fear.
It's a reminder that the city-county divide can be more than an administrative headache. It becomes a barrier that people living on the border are forced to cope with. The room carried a sense of urgency, a sense that the region could not continue separate forever. That strong feeling that someone needs to do something. And that feeling has been building in the region for a long time. A few years ago, a group did try to do something to address the separation. The plan was called Better Together, and it proposed that the only way to secure the future of the St. Louis region was to unify, for the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County to merge under one government. It was backed by years of research and the deep pockets of its supporters. It was one of the most organized efforts to mend the Great Divorce in decades. So what happened? What stopped it from becoming a reality? Meet me at the barriers. I'm Luis Antonio Perez, and this is Meet Me, a project from St. Louis Public Radio about connecting across divides to find a way forward. In this episode, part 2 of our deep dive into the St. Louis City-County split, we revisit one of the most well-researched and well-funded plans to reunite St. Louis City and County, the Better Together plan from 2019. We'll get into how it was developed, what caused it to crack and ultimately fail, and where do conversations about regional cooperation stand today? But first, let's go to North St. Louis, where a distinctive feature blights the landscape along the border. It makes the region's fragmentation impossible to ignore. Okay, I'm dealing with a very St. Louis type of issue. How to pronounce the name of a street. It's not Gravois, Choteau, or Spady. The street is spelled Gareshave. Garesche. That's Garesche. So I'm calling Miss D in North City, who lives on this street, to help me out.
Can you hear me, Luis?
Yes, I can. Hi, Miss D.
How are you today? I was trying to get to my phone.
Yeah, I was calling to ask a very specific question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you pronounce the street that you live on?
Garesche.
Garesche.
When I first looked at it, Garesh. Some say garage, but it's Garesche.
I want to say the name that folks that live there say.
Garesche.
And that's it.
That's the way, Garesche.
Garesche. Denise Hilliard, Miss D, lives alongside the St. Louis border right in the middle of Garesche Avenue, where the city-county line cuts across the road. Hello, Miss D.
Hello, how are you
How
guys
are you?
today?
Hi, it's Luis and Paola.
Come on in.
Oh, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Excuse the house is under construction. You don't have to take shoes off. This is, hey.
Oh my
put
God, but
shoes
it's
back
raining
on.
out there.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
You only know the history of this house. So many have come. Yes, come, my friend, come.
Miss D's house sits on the city side, but at the end of her driveway, there's a faded sign, Entering City of Jennings, which is in St. Louis County. We came here to ask Miss D about some strange man-made features out front that I'd only seen along the border in this part of the city. But like so many of my favorite encounters with St. Louisans, Miss D has a lot of her own story to share too. Miss D has lived in this house for the better part of 60 years. Her parents bought this home when she was 16 years old, the youngest of 3 children. When she became an adult, Miss D left home, got married, and had 2 sons. After her divorce, she lived in the only apartment she could afford in St. Louis, a building in South City.
Everything was vacant over there then. They were rehabbing that whole area. I was the only one over there. And at that time, I was like 33 years old, single, unafraid, determined I'm going to make this work. But my father said, you can't live over here like this. You can't, So I had to come back here. I didn't like it, but it was a reason.
Miss D felt the pull to come home, as if fate itself were calling her back. Then, shortly after moving in, her father passed away. Miss D spent the next 25 years in this house, raising her sons and caring for her mother, who died in 2016. Looking after 2 growing boys in North St. Louis wasn't easy.
Back doing in the 80s, gangs were very, very prevalent in this area. So I was very, very protective. They used to call me the warden. They did. That's why I had that basketball court built, to protect my sons.
The homes on this block are modest, 1,100 square feet, but the properties are big, more than twice the size of a typical city lot. Ample space to build whatever you need. So Miss D had a half basketball court built behind the garage. Kids from the surrounding blocks, from the city and the county, would hop fences, run over, and end up in Miss D's backyard all day. Away from the street, behind the garage, protected.
That was my lifesaver. That was my lifesaver.
Miss D was active in the civil rights movement, and she still prides herself on caring for her community. And she wants neighbors who care too. Neighbors who are aware, visible, willing to be active.
I said, you need to come outside sometimes. You need to come out and look around. Pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention.
When her next-door neighbor on the county side passed away, who she never saw, Miss D hoped for just one simple thing.
I prayed, send me someone decent. Send me someone decent. And he did, Mr. Jackson. He's only been there a year. And I'm just thankful that he's there. Very good neighbor. I said, this is the kind of neighbor that I want. This is what we need.
That neighbor is Mr. Larry Jackson, who's always lived outside of St. Louis City.
But I've always been right on the borderline of the county, all the way from U City to where I am in Jennings. So I've always lived on the border.
He bought this house on Garesche so he could take care of his sick mother.
I moved out of a four-family flat into this house. And my mom was living then, but she passed away last year in August. So I've been here by myself.
And while Mr. Larry might be here by himself, he's never really alone.
Excuse me. Hey, sis. I'm doing an interview with the public radio. Can I hit you back? No. Excuse me. Hey, sweets. I'm doing an interview with public radio right now at the house on the county line. You still in the county? Are we still having lunch?
You're a busy man, Larry. Man, you're that popular guy.
Well, when you the oldest person in the family, I guess you will be. You know, people need help.
When I finally got to talk to Mr. Larry, he shared so many great stories about college football and his family's ties to the struggle for civil rights in Arkansas and Mississippi. And eventually, I got around to what brought me there in the first place. That unique feature outside of his and Miss D's houses. In many places, the St. Louis City-County border is invisible. Here on Garesche, and across many streets in this part of town, the border is marked by a jagged row of large concrete barriers. 10 of them, blocking access to the other end of the street. They look like 2,000-pound concrete Lego bricks. The barriers turn the road into a dead end right in the middle, with Mr. Larry's house on Jennings on one side and Miss D's house in the St. Louis neighborhood of Walnut Park West on the other. The city of Jennings installed them about 6 years ago, citing a desire to curb speeding and crime. Some of the drivers who encounter these barriers just find other ways around, like cutting straight through Mr. Larry's front lawn.
Cars, trucks, utility vehicles. I haven't even had a FedEx truck to drive across.
And what do you think about that? Do you think that they should just, I don't know, do you like the barriers being there? Should they not be there?
I do. Yes, I do. Yeah. I like it. One second.
You got a lot of guests today.
Yes. I'm sorry, that's my nephew, my great nephew. CJ, come in and let me introduce you.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Luis. Nice to meet you. Do you have any opinions about the border? What do you think about these barriers out here?
Against Walnut Park and Jennings.
Mm-hmm. And across the whole county up here in the north side.
Well, I think it's good to keep people safe and stuff. Like, we need peace on both sides and stuff like that. Everything, so.
And you feel like the barriers help provide that peace?
Yes.
Okay.
It does.
And Mr. Larry agrees with his nephew. The barriers, though ugly and inconvenient, feel necessary to him, and they make the block a little more private.
Right. It is, because you're going to get traffic coming in one way. And that secures the area. And this used to be a popular way racing through, you know. And once you block it off, it makes it a little bit more private.
Miss D, on the other hand, has a very different opinion.
It made me bitter. It made me bitter with my neighbors, with the community.
Are you talking about the barriers?
The barriers, yes. It made me bitter because not enough of them were speaking up. Not enough of them act like it's good for the kids. No cars can come down the street. Well, it wasn't that many cars coming anyway. The children have sidewalks to ride their bikes on, long driveways to go up, you know? And a barrier in the middle of the street, I can't make it make sense. I just can't make it make sense to me.
Just then, Miss D also had an interruption. Her son Scott came by to check on her.
Oh, come on in, Scott.
Come on in.
You're just in time.
All right, Scott. All right, nice to meet you.
They're from NPR, Scott. They were asking me
I had my
about.
PBS shirt on the other day.
Tell them what they used to call me, Scott.
Warden. He was the warden. Okay, my name is Scott Hilliard, the youngest son and a product of my environment, in a good way. I love my community. I try to keep everything positive when we try to build, just build.
Do you have any opinions about those barriers?
I hate them. I hate them. And then, what was that? Just a few months ago, there was a lady across the street. She had a medical emergency. It took the ambulance 30 minutes just trying to figure out how to get there. Because it's not in the GPS system, it's not showing that the street is blocked.
Yeah, he said it's not in the GPS system.
Yeah.
Miss D and Mr. Larry may disagree on whether the barriers are good or bad, but they agree on most everything else, especially one thing. They express the same refrain I hear in most of my conversations with folks living along the St. Louis City-County border. We cannot continue like this. This division needs to be addressed. And 7 years ago, a group did try to address it. We'll dig into that story after a short break. The Better Together plan to reunite St. Louis City with St. Louis County started in 2013. It was supported by George Herbert Walker III, a St. Louis businessman and first cousin to former President George H.W. Bush, and Rex Sinkfeld, a local wealthy financier, along with then St. Louis Mayor Francis Slay and County Executive Charlie Dooley. Over the first few years of the project, Better Together studied operations and services in the St. Louis region, things like public safety, public health, and economic development. They looked at how they compare to best practices in other cities. In 2017, they assembled a task force made up of 5 individuals, business leaders, academics, people with deep ties to St. Louis from varying backgrounds and communities. This group was to take in firsthand research with other important studies about the region and gather community input to then make recommendations for what the St. Louis region should do to move forward. Arindam Kaur, a local attorney, was one of the 5 appointed to the task force. He's been committed to civic participation since his parents took him to see President Ronald Reagan when he visited their hometown of Waterloo, Iowa in 1984.
It was at the National Cattle Congress. I don't think my dad was even a citizen yet. It was just like, this is the amazing thing about America, where you can go and meet candidates and do this and that. And so that was sort of a signature moment for me, even at a young age.
He's always had a desire to help his community, something that led to his involvement in the Better Together task force. The group began with a shared premise that many St. Louisans recognize.
The status quo of the region simply was not sustainable. A highly fragmented system, very little cooperation, often being in conflict.
And because of that, the St. Louis region wasn't growing like other similar cities.
And so the vision and the mission was understanding that that is the challenge. Can we come up with a plan that, while could not, with a magic wand, fix everything, but at least could lay the foundation such that this region could continue to build upon, continue to reform, continue to improve, and that everyone had a fighting chance for success.
In our last episode, we learned about the Great Divorce and the constitutional changes in 1875 that allowed St. Louis City and St. Louis County to separate. Missouri's constitution has changed since then, but a remnant from the 1875 framework still remains with some patches and bug fixes. The Board of Freeholders process that oversaw the split 150 years ago is still written into the Constitution. But now, it also lays out a few escape hatches if the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County were to someday want to reunify. Option 1 and 2. The city and county could fully consolidate and reorganize into a single government. Option 3. The city could stay independent and annex or basically add parts of the county. Option 4, the city and county could create functional districts to handle specific shared services without merging actual governments. And Option 5, which is a wild card that allows for any other plan in case the other options don't fit. No matter the path, the process is strict. Specific timelines, a board of citizens drafting a plan, and coordinating elections. And any proposal would need a majority of voters in both the city and the county to say yes. That fourth option of functional districts for shared services was used in 1954 when a board of freeholders suggested and voters approved creating a metropolitan sewer district.
Do we go through this remarkably unique, quirky system in the Constitution that is only for St. Louis City and County, or do we go with the statewide vote?
Rather than the surgical procedure outlined for consolidation in the Constitution, there's a sledgehammer option. Change the Constitution. To do that, the Missouri legislature could refer an amendment to the ballot, or citizens could gather enough signatures and do the same. In both cases, voters statewide would need to approve the change. Arindam said that when the task force looked back at the limited success of the Board of Freeholders process, it went in a different direction.
Would it have been great to done this just locally? I think so, but I think for it to actually have the light of day, we thought the state constitutional process was the right piece.
But the constitutional route had drawbacks too. It meant that every voter in the state of Missouri, voters in Kansas City, Jefferson City, Branson, and the rest of the state, would weigh in on what St. Louis could do with their local government.
And let's temper this by the way that St. Louis is the economic engine for this entire state. So there is a vested interest for the success of St. Louis on a statewide vote.
There's also a vested interest in local identity. The connection residents in St. Louis County have to their own towns is strong. The task force was aware of this, too.
In our feedback here, the concept of municipalities was very, very, very strong. And so people in Kirkwood did not want to give up the idea of Kirkwood. And so we had to manage that a little bit because the dissolution of those municipalities was something that was difficult.
And there was one other very big issue that the task force did not address. Solutions for the St. Louis region's fragmented school system, especially with respect to funding and access to special services. Carr says that was a regret.
It would have been great to be able to do, but a little bit outside of our scope and frankly, almost too much to handle in this first tranche of recommendations.
But that aside, after years of research and discussion, in 2019, Better Together announced its proposal. And it was big news, as reported by St. Louis Public Radio's Jason Rosenbaum.
Better Together is recommending that a metro government oversee what is now St. Louis and St. Louis County. Arindam Carr, a member of the task force who came up with the recommended proposal, says the idea is to scrape away layers and layers of government that have held the region back.
There are real human costs to the splintered system in which we live and in which we have created. Fixing it will not be easy, but the alternative, to do nothing while people suffer, is simply not acceptable.
Arindam explained that when the task force handed off its research and recommendations to the Better Together organization, he expected there would be more conversation after the announcement, where communities and outside groups would have a chance to offer their input. But it didn't work out that way.
One of the regrets that I have on that is that once we were done and released the report, it was immediately put into the state petition process to be voted on by the state.
So the plan went forward. A proposal for reunification via constitutional amendment. One big metro government that would merge St. Louis City and county, including courts and police departments. The existing county municipalities would become municipal districts with less abilities to provide services, legislate, or collect taxes. The new mayor of this would-be megametropolis would be Steve Stanger, a rising star in the St. Louis political scene.
Through these recommendations, I envision generations of St. Louisans that are united in their drive for greatness and equal opportunity.
In the 2014 Democratic primary for county executive, Stenger defeated incumbent Charlie Dooley in a campaign that included accusations that Dooley was steering contracts to his political donors. An investigation found no criminal wrongdoing, but not until after Stenger went on to win the general election against his Republican opponent by less than 1% of the vote. As you might expect, the plan had its skeptics.
My name is Kara Spencer, and I am the 48th mayor of the city of St. Louis.
Mayor Spencer was aware of the plan to merge the city and the county even before she became an alderwoman in 2015.
At that time, I remember when it was first announced, I was wildly excited about a conversation related to pulling the city and county together. But the details, once they started to become clear, were enormously alarming. And in order for us to be successful, from my view, we really need to recenter the center of gravity around the city of St. Louis. And so I was frustrated by some of the aspects of that proposal, but did recognize that the concept was one that I had and retain hope for.
County Executive Sam Page also had reservations. He was chair of the county council when Better Together was proposed.
Well, I think it was startling to a lot of people. It was startling to me. It felt like disenfranchisement to people who had gotten used to a level of government that's really close to people who elect them. In our municipalities, most people know who their elected officials are. You meet them, they represent a small group of people. We have 1 million people in St. Louis County. We probably have close to 1,000 elected officials with all of our political subdivisions. And over the years, that's the kind of government that people in St. Louis County have gotten comfortable with. I served on the Creve Coeur City Council, so I have a comfort level with knowing your neighbors and as an elected official, having to explain your position to someone who lives on your street.
Overwhelmingly, the mayors and power players in St. Louis County were opposed to the plan. The Municipal League of Metro St. Louis is a nonprofit group that for over 100 years has served as a collective voice for the villages and cities in St. Louis County. Its executive director, Pat Kelly, thinks that the Better Together plan didn't consider the power dynamics at play when two governments merge.
I think there's something interesting in government if you pay attention long enough. It's only for a government who's ever in charge is the one that thinks they spend the money most efficiently. So under this, new government, or the Better Together plan, they were saying all the municipalities don't use their funds correctly, but we know how to use them, and we're going to, so it's really just a money grab to a certain extent.
From the perspective of many in the county, the bottom line is that consolidation will lead to fewer resources and services for their communities. Reggie Jones is the mayor of Delwood, a majority black municipality in North County with just under 5,000 people. He was first elected to the office in 2013.
Yeah, so as being mayor of one of those municipalities, we were banded with most of the other mayors who had concerns about the Better Together proposal. We were more concerned about taking away the voices of officials and also forcing the community to be part of one big conglomerate. Most people moved out of St. Louis City to be in smaller communities, smaller, more manageable, more hands-on communities. And so, like myself, I was a longtime resident, born and raised in North St. Louis. But when I got a family, we were looking for, better school districts, more access to entertainment, shopping, restaurants. And a lot of that was, definitely taking more place in the county. But the conglomerate thing, I think, will never take place.
You think never, ever?
Ever. Never, ever Better Together. I'm going to create a logo. Never, ever Better Together.
Yet another big issue underlying any kind of merger or consolidation between the city and the county is the impact it would have on black political power in the region. African Americans make up 42% of the population of the city of St. Louis. That share would drop to less than a third if the city and county were to merge. Black political influence in St. Louis has been hard fought. The city elected its first and second black mayors in the 1990s. The third wouldn't be elected until 2021. Mike Jones has been a political advisor in the St. Louis region for decades. His roots date back to the Black Power movement and working with Bill Clay, who is a Missouri congressman and one of the founders of the Congressional Black Caucus. Jones says he knows his criticisms of today's political leaders are pointed.
I made myself a promise when I got old that I wasn't going to sound like old guys when I was young. But I do sound like an old guy now that I'm old. And I got this term that I use, and it's really a pejorative term, but I use it prescriptively. What you have in today's black politicians, they're what I call entrepreneurial politicians. Don't make them bad people, okay? But this is what they do. This is their career.
It's a means to something else.
Exactly. And so if you take me, and I say I can't speak for Bill Clay, I wouldn't dare do it, but I will say I think he would agree with this. I said neither one of us ever thought about being anything that black people couldn't make us.
Sure.
Okay. It would not have occurred to me.
Mike Jones has the advantage of having served as a top staffer for both a St. Louis mayor and a St. Louis County executive. He was also born in 1949, around the high point of the city's population, over 850,000 residents. And he's seen that number dwindle over his lifetime, down to under 300,000. And he places blame for some of that on local elected officials.
The St. Louis leadership has always reminded me of the frog in a pot of boiling water that never jumps out because the pot gets hotter a little bit at a time and it keeps adjusting to the heat till one day, you boil up and you can't do anything because you didn't read the signs.
Mike Jones said that to get things moving again, it might mean finding new people who can take a fresh look at the issues in the region. Folks who aren't as attached to the old way of doing things. I've come to learn that politics in St. Louis is nuanced. And building coalitions isn't just a matter of listening and gathering input from different communities simply because it's the right thing to do.
I really don't care about the morality of the issue.
What do you mean?
Well, when people say, well, the right thing to do is impact the black community, the way I understand to do politics, you're going to come see me because you got to come see me. It's kind of like, well, if I ain't in the deal, then ain't going to be no deal. So now you figure that out, okay? So you can come up with the best idea in the world. If it didn't include me, it ain't an idea no more.
Right. It might not happen.
It won't happen.
And Mike Jones isn't saying that he specifically needs to be involved. He's talking about engaging with communities, especially Black St. Louisans, in a way that recognizes and respects them as the important and necessary collaborators and voters that they are.
There has to be a structural relationship that allows for conversation, negotiation, and reasonable compromise where everybody can see themselves being represented.
Despite Better Together's efforts to gather and implement ideas directly from communities, many people in the St. Louis region did not feel included. Arindam Kaur, the member of the Better Together task force, says the issue may be even more nuanced.
The dilution of black political power, that was something that certainly was top of mind for us. And while we tried to address that through our metro legislative system, we were nonetheless criticized for dilution of power in North County. And I think you will have a similar argument as it relates to the alders in North City and the dilution of their political power. And I shouldn't say political power, really political voice.
He says that despite skepticism, justified by the history of big plans like this that promise to help communities and turn out to harm them, Better Together's conversations with elected officials were different from its conversations with community members.
When we talk to citizens in North City, North County, they would say, yeah, I'm open to this if it actually improves my service. But if you talk to the municipal mayor of that community, you're just trying to take my power.
And if all of those nuanced headwinds weren't enough to navigate, suddenly a bombshell drops. one that added another chapter to the history of political corruption in St. Louis.
Right now on News 4 at 4, St. Louis County Executive Steve Stenger faces federal charges and resigns from office.
Earlier this morning, we learned the Department of Justice indicted Stenger on bribery and mail fraud charges.
In April of 2019, just 3 months after the official announcement of the Better Together plan, Steve Stenger, the would-be mega metro mayor, was indicted on federal charges for steering contracts to his political donors. Stenger did the very thing he accused his predecessor of doing. A court filing document in the case quotes a recording of Stenger from a private conversation. In talking about his 2018 election win, Stenger said, "How about that, I don't show up for the council meetings. I don't do I've been sitting at my house for the past 2 months, raising money, then won by 20%. The world's a up place." Stenger, who we didn't hear back from when we reached out for this story, would resign, eventually plead guilty, and serve time in federal prison. Even before he resigned, the Better Together group amended their petition so that Stenger wouldn't necessarily serve as mega mayor. But momentum was gone. Trust with the public had been broken. Better Together withdrew its proposal, and the plan was dead. Despite being against the Better Together plan, the Municipal League of Metro St. Louis, the group representing cities in the county, kept up its effort to explore a city-county merger that it had launched in 2019 by utilizing the Board of Freeholders process. They followed the rules and collected the necessary signatures, and the county seated its 9 freeholders in time. But the Board of Aldermen in the city faced political infighting and never agreed to a single appointment. A few months later, the COVID-19 pandemic became a global priority, and conversations about reunification were abandoned. Now, 7 years later, no plan to address the problems caused by St. Louis's Great Divorce has gained traction. But the feeling among many St. Louisans remains the same. We cannot continue like this. Mike Jones is among the voices saying that something needs to be done.
If you were starting the day with a blank sheet of paper for 500 square miles and 1,400,000 people, nobody would come up with what we got. You just wouldn't do it. So the question is, if you wouldn't do it today, why are you still doing it? So you got to put yourself in a place where you say, I got to be willing to take a risk to figure it out, because staying in this condition, this place, is going to be a disaster. Okay, so there's literally no upside to the status quo. Whatever you come up with has to be politically viable, but which means it probably won't be perfect, but it's got to be better.
Pat Kelly from the Municipal League also feels the urgency. He's particularly concerned about decades-long stagnation in the region's population, an issue that both the city and the county are currently grappling with.
If you don't have population growth, you're not going to have economic growth. But that's really what's facing our community as a whole, and that's what we need to look at to try to cure if we want to keep moving forward.
Mr. Larry Jackson on Garesche, he knows that any plan to merge or consolidate is going to be difficult. What do you think it would take to bring the city and the county together?
A miracle. A miracle, because they still got 2 points of view.
But how do you feel about the city and the county coming together and being one big municipality?
I feel great about it. That means everybody be treated fairly on both sides. So I think that it's time to level the ball field. But yes, I would probably vote yes on it.
Ms. D is also open to the idea.
I'm 75. I've never lived or resided outside the city limits. You know what? After this May tornado, I wouldn't have a problem with it, because we're looking at a desert, and people need housing. I mean, we need food. We can't think on city, county, all these little municipalities. We can't think like that now. Those days are gone, okay? I realize that, but we have to come together as a people.
Despite differences of opinion, I've heard a strong sense of community among St. Louisans. with county residents, with city residents, and those who live right along the border. And through my reporting for this episode, I learned that conversations are happening right now, behind the scenes among the region's power players. Last fall, the economic development agency Greater St. Louis, Inc. hosted a trip for nonprofit and civic leaders to Indianapolis. Part of the conversation was about the famous merger that happened there in 1970, called Unigov. East-West Gateway, the regional planning organization that distributes billions of dollars in federal transportation funds to Illinois and Missouri, also serves as a council of governments. It's in the very early stages of developing what it calls a regional alignment plan, an effort to bring together civic and community leaders from across the region to create a shared strategy and align local resources toward common goals. Meanwhile, the Missouri Historical Society is engaging in a region-wide civic pride campaign. It's called I Am St. Louis, and you might have already seen it out there. Even though there's currently no active proposal to merge the city and the county, ideas are simmering just beneath the surface. But if anything does happen, and conversations about reunifying St. Louis City and county start to become serious, you can meet me right here to talk about it. In our next episode of Meet Me, we're moving away from the mechanics of local government, and we'll explore a divide that plays out in a long-running St. Louis family business, when the younger generation faces a choice, whether to carry on with the family business or forge his own path. You've been listening to Meet Me, a project from St. Louis Public Radio about connecting across divides to find a way forward. Share this episode with your family and friends, and follow us on Instagram at MeetMeSTL. We also have a newsletter. You can sign up at stlpr.org/meetme. This episode was written, hosted, and produced by me, Luis Antonio Perez, with story editing by Alex Hoyer and Brian Heffernan. Mixing and mastering by Greg Montanu. Meet Me's engagement producer is Paola Rodriguez. Brian Heffernan is our executive producer. Theme music by Kutta and Friends. Special thanks to Jason Rosenbaum, Rachel Lippman, Chad Davis, Fred Ehrlich, Leslie Davis, Hiba Ahmed, Maya Norfleet, and Maya Jeremiah. Grant support comes from the James S. McDonald Foundation. Meet me back here next time.